Good afternoon and welcome. I am Lorna M. Johnson, founder of Lorna M. Johnson Global Institute. Thank you for tuning in today. In the midst of a global pandemic, our institute have worked hard to encourage the public to be smart against this virus. We have worked on prevention and awareness. We have been consistent saying stay at home to stay healthy. We have also encouraged legislation and protocols to support our healthcare system and to protect its frontline workers and professionals. While the entire world is in a crisis, in this one nation, we still have a lot of work to do to stay healthy because we need to heal on multiple fronts. So today we brought this town hall together because COVID isn't the only pandemic that we need to heal from. We have a serious condition that we need to talk about. And this condition existed way before Corona. And it will still be here long after Corona if we don't check ourselves for it right now. Across this country, our public discourse, our talk among ourselves, the hate speech on the news, the hate in the streets, our social media exchanges, our mutual respect for people with different views, our common decencies, all of these are flatlining right now. Our core values are on life support. And the truth is, it's us adults who are responsible more than it is the young people. Every single day in school, kids from 4 to 18 years old put their hands over their hearts and pledge to live in a country that is one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. As adults, we have a way to get to the truth of those words and live up to the lofty expectation that we have set for those kids. We need young people to help. We need young people to help us get there. So today, knowing we have marathons to run, we decided to start it with the first step, a conversation. To have this conversation, I've asked a little help from some of my friends and a couple of strangers, because that's where the real work starts. So, speaking with us today, we will have Congresswoman Karen Bass, 37th District and Chair of Congressional Black Caucus, activist, Special Olympic Chair, and founder of Unite, Tim Shriver, musician and author of Clandestine Conversations, Talk with KKK, Daryl Davis, former Imperial Wizard of KKK, Scott Shepard, along with some other guests and special appearances. To navigate us through this conversation, I am proud to welcome an award-winning CNN national and international correspondent, a woman whose courage and commitment to the story we admire, respect, and cherish. We need some truth tellers like her. Welcome, Sarah Seidner. Sarah,
Thank you.
I have to ask you, from wars to the Middle East, to hate rallies, to protests, you've seen a lot. What have you learned? And where do we go from here?
Thank you so much, Lorna, for creating this space where we can talk and not scream, where we can find solutions and not divisions. It is a joy to be a part of something like this. And it's always very difficult, right? The thing that I think that I have learned from covering living abroad, living in India, living in Jerusalem, being in Afghanistan and Libya during the Arab Spring, as well as other countries like Bhutan that has a gross domestic happiness that they look at as opposed to gross domestic product. I think a couple of things that I've learned in my travels as a journalist is that human beings, no matter what your skin color is or your socioeconomic background or what you do or what your politics are, we all want the basic necessities that make us feel joy and make us feel comforted. And those are things that are universal. And so there's no reason why we, as just plain human beings, take all the color and divisions out of it, cannot have a conversation and cannot work to help make a better place for ourselves and our children and our children's children. I also realize in being in war zones, literal ones and figuratively, because sometimes when you're in a political sort of hash up, it feels like you're in an argumentative version or battle, is that it is much easier to destroy than it is to build. Destroying things can be quick. It can be fast. Thousands of years of history have been destroyed. Building that back up can take a long time and a lot of effort. So those are kind of the two things that guide me as I talk to people and try to understand where they're at and meet them where they are. And I'm really happy to be here, Lorna.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you again, Sarah. I think Sarah may be wanting to introduce Tim.
So we have got, I'm hoping that we have all of our folks. I know that I've seen them pop up fairly quickly. And so we are going to hear from Karen Bass. She's a Congress member from the 37th Congressional District. She will be on in just a bit. She's also, as you mentioned, the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. But first, we're going to speak with Timothy Shriver. Tim is an activist for Americans with Disabilities. He is also a Special Olympics chair and the founder of Unite. I have been looking at some of the things that you've been doing, Tim, and I noticed in a speech that you gave, yes, we reporters dig deep. It was a while ago.
Really stretching.
Yes, I went and really looked. When you said in this talk, and it was about the Special Olympics, you were talking about how important it was. You said that when we cross a line of misunderstanding and fear and make a connection with someone who at some level scares us, it heals our fear. How do you cross that line? I know it was lovely.
I'm so honored.
How do you cross that line? How do you break out of your own fear and make that move to try to have a conversation with someone who actually makes you nervous for whatever reason that is?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, it's the $1 million question, Sarah, and thank you, Lorna, for having me. I think, ultimately, these are all questions of relationships. One of my mentors in the education space, Jim Comer, wrote almost 60 years ago about the issues of race and culture and the injustices facing Black and brown children in America as a battleground, as a force field of relational fear, anger, and mistrust that occurs even in communities where many families bring their children to school, but the school is not welcoming, is not open, is not receptive, doesn't see children. Even teachers, those of us trained as teachers, we weren't trained in child development. We were too often trained to judge children as good or bad, or smart or not so smart, or high achievers or low achievers. That's the mentality that too often dominates, instead of being trained as child developers, as people who could grow and strengthen relationships. So how do you do it? You have to shift your mindset, but we can learn some of this stuff. We can learn empathy. There are ways to practice empathy. We can show people how to imagine themselves, take what we call perspective taking. Take a chance and put yourself in someone else's shoes, but do the whole thing. Don't just say it. Picture yourself walking down a street as a person of color, or maybe not as a person of color. Picture how the world looks to you. Picture what you might be afraid of. Picture what happens to you when people judge you, point the finger at you, or cross the street. and how are you feeling? So we can teach our children the relationship skills that would allow us to, in some ways, bridge that gap, because most of all of these hatreds, I know we think they're fueled a lot by greed and anger, and they are, but they're also fueled by long-standing systems that cause us to stereotype one another and want to elevate one group over another, So in Special Olympics, you think to yourself, well, that's just a sports organization, right? But people forget that people with intellectual disabilities in 1968, there were 200,000 people with intellectual disabilities locked in institutions in 1968. Almost 250,000 Americans were in places with 15-foot high concrete walls because of their birth. So Special Olympics said, let's use sport. Why? Because sport is something where we easily develop common ground. So I may not understand you, I may not speak the same way you do, but I can shoot baskets with you. Or we can run together, or we can play soccer together. I can kick you the ball. And all of a sudden, all those skills we talk about, empathy, perspective taking, even affection, love, connection, these things can emerge all of a sudden in just the toss of a ball. And, we've seen this in sport in our country, has done quite a lot. I mean, we say that we haven't done enough, that's for sure. But there have been ways in which, for instance, sport has helped us to do some work, some of the foundational work to reduce the corrosive effect of racism and exclusion. So, I think, my work is in two areas, has been historically in two areas, in teaching children how to have what we call inclusive mindsets. How do you grow children to have an inclusive mindset rather than a fear-based mindset? We both have both in us. The question is, can we strengthen inclusivity and reduce fear and antipathy? That's a school-based project. We call it social and emotional learning, or inclusive mindsets. And then, the rest of the work, Sarah, has been in sport. And I think sport, even now, is, we see sports figures leading the country. And we also see sport, I think, as a potential platform where people can come together.
I think that we are going to have a question now that Lorna is going to sort of take in from folks who are watching the town hall. So I'm going to go ahead and toss it to Lorna. And this question, I think, will be to you, Tim.
Thank you.
Oh, you got that? Okay. This question is from Kojo from Columbus, Ohio. He asks, how do you think we can get faith leaders from all religions on board to work together against racism, hate, and intolerance?
I think it's a fantastic question. And I think in some ways, faith leaders are in some ways the untapped resource. And in all honesty, I don't want to sound accusatory, I don't think they've done their job on racism. I know in my own tradition, the Catholic tradition, our church just hasn't done the job. It has a history that has included racism, and it hasn't done the work, the necessary work, the hard work of getting it out of the church and teaching that in my tradition, the ideals, the discipleship of a man named Jesus has to include love of neighbor. I mean, it's not even, there's no gray area here, right? So I think we've got to invite churches, those people who train religious leaders in seminaries and in religious schools and educate, how this works, how racism, how othering, how stigma works, how religions contribute to it. How many religions actually think my religion's better than yours? It's small, but it's a powerful othering experience, right? I'm superior, you're inferior. And all of a sudden, these insidious hatreds creep in. So I think we've got to ask all the religions, all the religious leaders, from storefront churches all the way to the biggest, most well-funded, if I can put it that way, religious leaders, to put ending racism and revealing it, discussing it, and healing it at the center of their agendas when and if we ever get back together. But even before then, I do an online religious service on Sunday in the last month. Actually, it's been longer than that, even before this current awareness has peaked. But I'm very proud that our little community, it's a small church in Washington, D.C. called St. Martin's. I'm proud that that community has placed fighting racism at the center of homilies, the practices in the church, the celebrations, the music, and so on. So it's not impossible, but it's going to take will, and it's going to take getting people out of their comfort zone. And if there's ever a time we needed to do it, it's right now.
Great. Thank you, Tim. You know, you mentioned, are you a preacher also? You didn't tell me that.
People have said I have a wannabe. I have a wannabe. If I had an organ, I could really get going, but I'm not going to. No,
I am so, really impressed by your Unite
you.
and what you're doing with Unite. You talk about dealing with people from an ex-convict to ex-presidents. Those are people that you've been dealing with. And you talk about writing this book on Unite. And you're saying that people are co-authoring. That is such an amazing thought that you would come up with this beautiful idea and then talk about the world is co-authoring with you. I think that is just a profound way of putting it. And I'm just so impressed by your work. And so right now, one of the things I was looking at was George Bush, some of the things that George Bush was talking about in one of your Unite videos. So I think we may want to play it now.
In this time of testing, we need to remember a few things. First, let us remember we have faced times of testing before. Following 9/11, I saw a great nation rise as one to honor the brave, to grieve with the grieving, and to embrace unavoidable new duties. And I have no doubt, none at all, that this spirit of service and sacrifice is alive and well in America. Second, let us remember that empathy and simple kindness are essential, powerful tools of national recovery. Even at an appropriate social distance, we can find ways to be present in the lives of others, to ease their anxiety and share their burdens. Third, let's remember that the suffering we experience as a nation does not fall evenly. In the days to come, it will be especially important to care in practical ways for the elderly, the ill, and the unemployed. Finally, let us remember how small our differences are in the face of this shared threat. In the final analysis, we are not partisan combatants. We are human beings, equally vulnerable and equally wonderful in the sight of God. We rise or fall together, and we are determined to rise. God bless you all.
So Tim, we should let people know that it's unite.us. That is your website. And y'all, he has everyone from like Oprah on there to best-selling author Shaka Shengour, who spent 19 years in prison, to Il Volo, a world-famous singing group that sings a beautiful version of Ave Maria, and they sang it for the Pope. You heard from dozens of people, and I clicked through your site. And there are so many different stories from different faiths and from different angles, from some of the Special Olympic athletes that are, have taken part in that. And their stories are really touching. What have you learned from the dozens of people who have participated in what we can do to find common ground and to learn about each other without judging each other?
Yeah. Well, first of all, again, thank you, Sarah, for spending so much time doing your homework on this. I'm very honored and flattered. We had over 250 people from all over the world agree to spend time with us for almost 25 hours of content, live streaming and taped streaming content, over 24 hours on May 1st. It feels like 100 years ago, right? May 1st, it seems like a different world. But you could hear in President Bush's voice, but you could hear it in the voices of the homeless women in Seattle. And you mentioned Shaka Shengour, and you could go to Lee Daniels or listen to Amy Grant. The thing that struck me, or Devon Franklin, I mean, you have people, and we were explicit about wanting faith-based leaders to be a part of this, because we believe, the Unite community believes, that at its core, our crisis is not just political, but spiritual. And that our hearts are wounded and broken in this moment. Our hearts, you mentioned at the beginning, we see this in the extraordinary, long-standing, centuries-long struggles of people of color in our country. But everywhere you look, we're a country in pain right now. And healing that pain will require all of our resources, not just solving a political issue and not just seeing 2 points of view on an issue, but actually seeing one point of view, the point of view of the uniter. And that's a different thing, like CNN, you guys do a great job of showing us two sides of an issue. And, your competitors in the cable news business, they do the same thing. We think there's another thread, the thread that actually shows us the one side, what we call the views, the hopes, the dreams of the exhausted majority who actually don't want to hate other people. I think we've seen this in the protest, so many people of color, of course, claiming their voices, leading these charges, demanding change, being resilient in the face of criticism, being undeterred by obstacles. But they're being joined by people of goodwill from other backgrounds and other walks of life who want an end to racism. They might not know how. They may have been perpetrators. They may have unconscious bias, but they don't want to. We're starving to get out of the trap we're in. So we tried there, and I'll come all the way to your question, Sarah. What surprised me? What changed me?
Yeah.
I think in some ways, knowing that I was not alone. I saw, I'll just mention two. I saw Lee Daniels. I don't know Lee Daniels. He's an extraordinarily talented director. I saw him speak almost to me about the pain of his struggle with alcohol. And I felt him speak almost to everybody saying, don't do it. Mm-hmm. It was almost like he was my friend. And then Amy Grant came on. I don't know Amy Grant, but she willingly came on and said, here's my practice. My practice is I repeat over and over again. Yes, this is how we live. We live divided, broken. We live stressed out. We live struggling. But this is who we are. We are loved. We are loved. We are loved. And it's not that I haven't heard those words before, but I all of a sudden felt I'm not alone on this. There are other Americans, black and white, rich and poor, gay and straight, able-bodied and disabled, Republicans, Democrats, that we're in this together. And I all of a sudden felt, my goodness, this was the dream I have for the country. I was raised to think the country could be great. It sounds almost naive to say it. But at the end of the call, even though I was, tired and I had been up for 26 hours and I just was I felt so seen and heard myself. And, you think, well, you don't need this. Well, other people do, but I do. We all do.
Yeah.
Sarah, I'm going to pose a question to you and Tim. And just you've been in the middle of the protest and you've been around. And what is your feeling of the protest? And I'm going to ask the same of you, Tim.
I will just quickly tell a story since we're talking about sort of coming together and finding that common ground. I was struck, and something happened during the protest in Minneapolis after the killing of George Floyd that I haven't had happen yet in my career. And that is that it just so happened I was out in the protest and the police chief of Minneapolis was there. And he showed up to the area where George Floyd had been killed. And his officers stood accused of killing a man. And he came out and he kneeled near the site where George Floyd was killed, and he prayed. And there wasn't a press conference. This wasn't the media wasn't called. I just happened to be there because we were doing a story on the folks that were out there. And I turned around and someone told me, hey, the chief's behind you. What ensued after that was an incredible moment of compassion that brought us all truly to tears. Afterwards, I cried and had not done that in my career in front of people. I try to keep that to myself. But we happened to have the family of George Floyd on the air live with Don Lemon. And the chief was standing before me, and I thought, I have to go try to talk to him. I know he's not going to talk to me. I mean, I had all these concepts about what was going to happen because no chief ever talks during these things. There's legal issues. There's settlement issues they're worried about. The city's not going to want him to talk. The union's not going to want him to talk. He's not going to. Had all these concepts, but I said, I have to try. I'm a reporter. That's what I do. So I walked into a group of people who were trying to chat with him from the community, and I started asking him questions with our camera there, and we ended up going live. And at that moment, we had the family on. I did not know that. So the family started using me as a conduit to ask him questions. And when I told the chief that The family of George Floyd, his brother, was on the other line. And I was asking a question from the family to him. He removed his every time I mentioned it, he had a question from the family. And the respect that was shown there when I turned back to the camera, and they were live from a satellite. The brother of George Floyd began to weep openly on the air after hearing from him and after seeing the response. And I began to crack up as I was sending it back to the anchor. There had been so much anger and so much just an explosion of anger. And in this one moment, there was so much compassion and so much understanding. It broke that feeling of rage that had been permeating throughout not just Minneapolis, but the country and even beyond United States of America.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many people came up to me afterwards and said, I have hated the police my whole life. And that one thing that the chief did and the one conversation you had there made me see them as human. And on the other side of it, it was, wow, I never thought of it that way, that both sides have to deal with this now for the rest of their lives, right? This is going to be something that's a mark in their lives. And so the moment of compassion was so much stronger than anything else, and the hatred and the frustration and all of the other things that are natural human emotions. And I was really struck by that. So there was a coming together there. And to this day, I still feel that. That happened at the end of May. It actually happened on my birthday, oddly, when I was out there, and I still feel
Happy
that.
birthday.
So it was the greatest gift. Honestly, it was the greatest gift I could have received, to see that compassion.
I saw that. I actually saw that, Sarah, and it was truly a moment. And I've watched you a few times, and that was really, you could tell everybody was just so moved. And the way you communicated that, you could feel that there was just something deep that was coming out of you. And it was surely a very impressive moment. The whole situation was amazing. And so thank you for that. And thank you for the great work that you're doing also on the front line. You've been amazing. And I've been watching you and admiring you. So thank you so much for the work that you do. Tim, would you like to say something about that?
First of all, it's an enormously moving story, and I'm grateful, Sarah, that you were there. I'm grateful that you had the courage to cry on the air, because I think that's really important. Actually, I know you'd say typically you don't want to express yourself or maybe expose yourself in that way, but I think we're so desperate for common humanity that when all of us, just let our guard down a little bit, like the performances, like one of the things that we found on the call tonight was the less scripted the performance, the better, and I mean, I know this as a journalist, but still, like, we still try to get everything ready, and get it just right and make sure every word. And sometimes that's not what people want. They just want to know you're a human being, And
they don't want perfection, right? They want humanity.
And Mr. Floyd's brother's heart is breaking, and the police officer is trying to, in the face of his enormous personal, I suppose, guilt and culpability, trying to express his enormous side. It's a beautiful thing. I mean, back to your question, Lorna, I think we went to 4 protests. I've been to 4 protests here in Washington. I live in Washington, D.C. and in Maryland. I did a little bit of protesting way back when I was a little fella. I protested during the era of apartheid. I remember several times. I've protested at military installations when I was in my 20s. But it's been a long time since I was out in the street and marching and chanting and singing and dancing. And the thing that struck me, I know this may sound strange, but the thing that struck me was the enormous affection people were showing to each other. There, the first protest we went to was just shortly after the news began to escalate, and we began to see the full horror of the news. It was Black Lives Matter protest. We were all in cars, and we gathered at a huge parking lot in Northeast Washington. So of course there was a huge traffic jam, but I have to say, police officers were everywhere helping people to get lined up, and the parades were, the lines of the cars were forming, and we were able to get out this early, mid-pandemic, and we were only supposed to get out to hang signs on our car. So my daughters, my wife, and I, we got to the parking lot, we hung our signs on our car. And as soon as, you got out of the sunroof or went around to put it in the window, someone came over to offer you water. I mean, I don't even know who folks were, but offering you water, hey, come over here, or, are you getting in line here? Let me back up this car to help. And there was just a sense of, there is a sense, I think, of so much solidarity in these protests that I just hadn't seen before. I'd seen most of my life. It's always been, one group against another. You almost could feel in the old days, one march coming down one way and the opposite coming down the other way. And I know we've got opposition on this one. And believe me, I know this is not a problem that's going to be solved with one or two cute moments or one or two even moving, authentic moments. But the core thing that, Sarah, you brought out is changed hearts. If anything, the way a friend of mine said to me years ago, I mean, I worked in education for almost 15 years. Racism is institutionalized hatred. And the opposite of institutionalized hatred is, in my simple way of looking at it, institutionalized love. And if
Beautiful.
We've got to start with just meeting just taking off our hats.
And I'm gonna jump in here, Timothy, because
please.
That when you said that, the meeting of minds, there is a perfect person to talk to about that, who has gone to the belly of the beast, basically. Daryl Davis is the author of Clandestine Relationships. He's a blues musician, an R&B musician. He has traveled the world. He's there's a lovely picture of Daryl. I've been speaking to him for years. That's the front of his book there, and you'll see that he's standing near a burning cross with the Ku Klux Klan member. Daryl, you have spent years, and I've been to your house, where you had in your closet 40 plus Ku Klux Klan robes hanging in your home. They were handed to you by high level members and some regular folks who were in the Klan that decided to leave. And that was their way of saying, I'm out. You take them. These are yours. How on God's earth did you even begin to approach a member of the KKK as a Black man in this country?
Well, I want to thank you, Sarah and Lorna, for having me. And, racism has always fascinated me. And who better to ask the question that I formed in my mind at the age of 10 after having rocks and bottles thrown at me as the only Black Cub Scout in a parade? The question I formed was, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? And I've been looking for that answer for 52 years. But who better to ask than someone who would go so far as to join an organization that has today a 155-year history of hating people who don't look like them and who do not believe as they believe. So that's why I went, as you put it, to the belly of the beast. And, a missed opportunity for dialogue is a missed opportunity for conflict resolution.
What has it been like? What are those conversations like? Because you spent years talking with Klans members. This isn't a one-time thing. I know you, and I've heard the stories and even been there for some of them. What is it that you approach them with? I mean, are you going there to change minds, or are you going to have these conversations for some other reason?
No, you absolutely do not go there to change minds. And oftentimes when you see my name in the media, it'll say, Black blues musician, converts 200 Klansmen or something like that. I did not convert any of them, not even a one. But yes, I am the impetus for over 200 to change their own mind. What I do is I simply plant the seed, and I go there to listen to them, to hear them out. Because, I've been around the world. I've been to 57 different countries on 6 continents. And so I've been exposed starting at the age of 3. My parents were in the Foreign Service, so we were assigned to various countries. I grew up as an American Embassy brat. And now today, as a musician, I perform all over the world. But I've come to find out one thing. No matter how far I go from the United States and how many different things I see, when I come home, I realize everybody that I saw, no matter how far away, is a human being. And we all want the same things. We want to be loved. We want to be respected. We want to be heard. And we want the same things for our family as anybody else does. And so what you do is you go there and listen to them and appeal to their humanity, because this behavior, this attitude, this ideology is a learned ideology. You're not born with it. So that's right. So if it can be learned, it can be what? Unlearned. It may take a little bit of time. It doesn't happen overnight, because, they grew up with this. It's been saturated in them for a number of years. So it may take a little while to take it down and give them that exposure. But here's the thing at the bottom of the line here. When you have problems, like say in a police department or a corporation or company, it's usually you start at the top, management. When they tighten things up there, it will trickle down and things will be tightened down below. All right, it's called trickle down. The management sets the example. Right. Well, I believe with racism, it's the opposite. You got to trickle up, because here's what happens. Ignorance breeds fear. We fear those things we don't understand. If you do not keep that fear in check, that fear in turn will escalate and breed hatred, because we hate the things that frighten us. If you do not keep that hatred in check, that hatred in turn will escalate and breed destruction. We want to destroy the things that we hate. Why? Because they frighten us. But guess what? At the end of the day, they may have been harmless and we were simply ignorant. You take, for example, 3 years ago, in 2017, August the 12th, Charlottesville, Virginia, where they had a white supremacist rally. On that day, there was a lot of ignorance in Charlottesville, Virginia. There was a lot of fear. There was a lot of hatred. What did it culminate in? It culminated in destruction when a white supremacist got inside his vehicle and deliberately tried to murder as many counter-protesters as he could by driving his car full force, full speed into the crowd.
He managed to kill one person. Yeah.
Yes, he did. He injured 20 and ended up murdering one young lady named Heather Heyer. That is the ignorance that breeds the fear, that breeds the hatred, that breeds the destruction. So if you want to cure this problem of racism, let's not start at the top. Forget about the destruction. What is destroyed is not coming back. The next level down is hatred. That is just a symptom. Forget about that. Go down one more, that's fear. Forget about that. That's another symptom. Go to the source. The source is ignorance. And if we can cure ignorance, then there's nothing to fear, because we fear what we don't know. And if you cure ignorance, there's nothing to fear. With nothing to fear, there's nothing to hate. With nothing to hate, there's nothing to destroy. The good thing is this: there is a cure for ignorance, and that cure is called education. Education and exposure. And that's where we should focus our energies, because we have such a diverse, great country. We have everything in this country and every kind of person from all over the world in this country. Let's take that opportunity and get to know one another. We spend too much time in this country talking about the other person, talking at the other person, or talking past the other person. Why don't we just spend a few minutes talking with the other person?
But how do you get past that anger that is already there because people have been afraid of you? There is a hatred there. And when someone hates you, the natural reaction is to be afraid of them and hate them back, right?
Okay.
I mean, how do you get past that?
Okay, number one, you got to know who you are. You have to know who you are. I've been dealing with KKK members, neo-Nazis, individual white supremacists for 35, going on 36 years now, right? You got to know who you are and read up on them, learn as much as you can about their position. I don't support that ideology, but I'm willing to listen to it because I'm confident in who I am. For example, when I would interview these people, I would ask that question that had been plaguing me since age 10. How can you hate me when you don't even know me? Well, Mr. Davis, Black people are prone to crime. Well, how do you figure that? You all are criminals. Why? Well, look at the prison systems, Mr. Davis. There are more Blacks in prison than there are whites. Okay, that's a half truth. There are more Black people in prison than whites, but he's not considering the inequity of the judicial system, or the fact that some people cannot afford adequate legal representation, whether they're innocent or guilty, and that's where they end up. I'm told that Black people are inherently lazy. We don't want to work. We prefer to scam the government welfare system. I'm also told that Black people are born with a smaller brain than white people. And so therefore, the smaller the brain, the lower the IQ. The bigger the brain, the more capacity for IQ. So when most people would hear something like that, they would push back or even try to smack the person across the table. But why would I be offended by that? What the man is saying is offensive indeed, but I am not offended by what he's saying. Why? Why would I be offended by a lie? That man doesn't know me. He only met me 5-10 minutes ago, and all he sees is this, the color of my skin, and he's going to define me. I know who I am. I'm not going to let somebody who just met me 5 or 10 minutes ago define me by the color of my skin. Now, if my mom or dad told me things like that, I might be a little concerned. They brought me into this world, right? But so you must know who you are before you try to go and deal with somebody else, because if you don't know who you are, they will define who you are. So you go in there confident that you know who you are, and then when you let them get it all out without pushing back, you've thrown them off their game. And now because as soon as they see you, their wall goes up. They're expecting a fight, and their wall goes up. But you throw them off the game by listening to them. You're not bending over and kissing their feet or anything like that. You're giving them a platform. We don't have to respect what somebody says, but let's respect their right to say it. All right. So I give them that platform. I've thrown them off their game, and now their wall is down, and they're more receptive to listen to me. They're going to reciprocate. So what do you have to say? So that's my opportunity to plant a seed. And what you do is you don't attack the other person's position. What you do is you defend your own. Because as soon as you say, well, you're wrong about this and blah, 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 that wall is coming back up. So you say, well, in my experience, I don't have a criminal record. I have never been on welfare. I've never measured my brain size, but I'm pretty sure it's the same as everybody else's. So I'm defending myself. And that causes them, when they go home, they have to think about, I just sat down for 3 hours with a black man, had a conversation. And, what he said was true, but he's black. But it was true, but he's black. So they're having this cognitive dissonance thing. And then so that's their dilemma. They have to come to the conclusion by themselves. Okay, what he said was true. Now, do I disregard the fact that he's black and believe the truth and turn my life in another direction? Or do I continue living a lie? That's up to them.
And with that, I'm going to bring in someone who has lived as an imperial wizard of the KKK. His name is Scott Shepard. We're going to bring him in. He has agreed to speak with us. And, I'm curious, Scott, you were listening to Daryl and how he has had these conversations. I'm curious, from your perspective, how you learned to have hatred towards Black folks, how you ended up as an imperial wizard, which is sort of in the national realm of the Ku Klux Klan.
Well, it pretty much started when I was a young kid. I came from Indianola, Mississippi, which is the home of B.B. King, and also the home of the White Citizens Council. And I came from a very dysfunctional family, a very violent alcoholic father, and I had no self-esteem. I didn't like myself. I didn't like anyone, and I was looking for a place to fit in. And I was right in the hotbed of racial issues at that time. I was born in 1959, and I was looking for a place to fit in. And the Klan was right there in my backyard. And it's kind of strange situation because I was raised by a black lady. And being raised by a black lady, it just, it was a crazy ordeal because here I loved her like a mother, and then I ended up joining the Ku Klux Klan.
So here you are, raised by a black nanny who I think took care of several generations of your family, correct?
Absolutely. And she, of course, you called her a nanny. I really don't call her a nanny. I call her, a mother, because she was really more of a mother than she was a nanny.
It's fascinating to hear that, because there was obviously love there for someone who was black, and yet this organization has tried to tear black people down and murder black people. Can I ask you what it was that got you to leave that behind, and if some of the difficulty of leaving had to do with feeling good and powerful when you hate people, feeling like there was power in being a part of that group? What is it that sort of stripped that away and got you to move away from that?
Well, you're correct. It was an organization that I entered because I wanted to feel powerful and important. as soon as I joined, I felt an immediate feeling of importance. But there was always this little bitty voice in the back of my mind: do you really believe the things that you're preaching and participating in? And that, that was the biggest thing that I went almost 20 years having that in the back of my head. And it came to a point that certain situations in my life, uh, I was at a restaurant one night in Nashville, Tennessee, having a few drinks and eating dinner, and I left, and I got pulled over by the police and failed the sobriety test and illegal weapon underneath my car seat. And I've been watched by the police because I formed a rally in Pulaski, Tennessee, just that same day. Uh, in order to get the charges dropped, I agreed to go to an alcohol and drug treatment center to get the paperwork and take it back to the judge and have the charges dropped. Well, I didn't know it. I walked in that drug treatment center and went in one person, came out another. I was exposed to people of all different races, religions, sexual preferences, and I had to sit down and go through the council meetings with them and learned a lot about them. They learned a lot about me. Found out we had a lot in common, and that was where the seed was planted.
Wow.
Wow. Scott, I have Dr. Williams from Tallahassee, Florida. Has a question for you. He wants to know what role do you think the media had in promoting the vision of creating violent environment and inspiring hate? And what responsibility do you think that the media has to heal these divides?
Yeah, I think the media does feed into it. Of course, the media won't, every time there's an act of violence, the media rushes to that. They don't. They don't focus on the solution. They focus on ratings and the violence that's going on at that time. And I think they need to focus more on the solution.
And I'll ask the same question to Daryl.
Yes, I agree. We need to focus on solutions. It's important to show the violence and the things, that are going on because, you want the national spotlight on that because that's what brings changes. Just like with Martin Luther King and the Rosa Parks incident, Rosa Parks was not the first Black woman to refuse to give up her seat. It was known around, Montgomery, Alabama, but nobody else knew about it. But when Dr. King put the national spotlight on it through media and everything else, that's when the ripple effect happened, and other bus companies began changing their laws. So yes, we need to focus on solutions as well as what's going on, and we should rely on the media to give both of those things. Show us what's happening, show us ways it can be fixed, like you all are doing right now by having my good friend Scott Shepard on here telling you what it's like from the inside, and myself on here telling you what it's like to talk to somebody on the inside, and people like Tim Shriver talking about the religious aspect of it.
And Tim, what do you see? That question that was asked was, should the media be covering this, always rushing to the problem? And that is literally in journalism school. I will tell you, you are taught to expose an issue, expose a problem, show light on a problem, which we do. But that other side of it is concerning, that we don't enough show how things can get fixed, right?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I just want to say how moved and admiring I am, Daryl, of your work, and Scott, of your story and your honesty. And I'm just honestly just blown away. And I feel embarrassed that I hadn't heard about your stories before this, but I'm grateful, Lorna, to you and Sarah for bringing us together, because if nobody else benefits from today, I've certainly have grown a great deal. So I'm just grateful to both of you because, and a lot of times people will do these things. They don't want to share them. It's not comfortable to be. So I think the courageous storytelling that you're doing is actually what the media doesn't cover. Now, here's the thing, Sarah. I talked to a colleague of yours. I'm not going to say who, and I'm not going to say what network, but someone in the same business you're in who said that when he wanted to cover solutions, I just gave a little bit away, when he covered solutions, he was brought in to the producer and they said, get rid of that stuff, the ratings drop. When you cover solutions, we want fighting and outrage and anger on the air. That's what keeps the ratings going. Now, I'm not in that business, so I understand everybody's got to make a living. And if anger and outrage and yelling is what keeps ratings up, I understand people have to follow that model. But there's another story in the country. This story we just heard today, I'm guessing, Daryl, you could probably tell a dozen. And I'm guessing, Scott, you could probably bring us another dozen men and women who've had similar journeys to yours. These are big, powerful news-making stories. They are generating, you two men here are generating a vector of social and emotional change that people are starving for. Starving. So yeah, we got to cover the fire. Yeah, we got to cover the outrage. Yes, we've got to cover the injustice. No question. But there's another story that has to be told, which is Americans who are finding solutions who are uniting across these binaries and aren't screaming at each other, but are healing each other. And I mean, we just got a master class from Scott and Daryl in that. And my only thing is, how do we get more? That's what I'm trying to do with Unite. I mean, we're not competing with CNN, God forbid, or the other great networks that are out there. But there's another story, and we're going to try to help reveal it. And I'm grateful that Lorna, you're obviously on the same path. And so I think the media has to own what some of my friends call the outrage industrial complex.
Yeah.
And I've in the last 2 weeks, I've turned it off. I got to say, I'm not against the news business.
Look, and I'm in it, and I know what this is. I mean, there is a path that people, when something bad happens, I always get 1,000 people asking me what happened.
Right.
And when I do a story on coming together, they're like, whatever.
Who cares? Right.
And social media has made that even worse.
Right.
In my view, if you look at social media and where we're going, it is the most outrageous, the most extreme, the most angry, the people on the fringes are getting more attention on social media, people to say something, the negativity that's out there. So it is very difficult because I think our brains, you had mentioned about fear, respond to fear in this visceral way and compassion a little differently, right? And
but one of my great heroes, I'm guessing the heroes of people here, Desmond Tutu said, had the honor of hearing him speak almost 20 years ago. He said, people think evil is more powerful than good. Or he said, it's not.
No,
evil is not more powerful than good, but he said in his beautiful accent, it's better organized. Now, Daryl is organizing good. Right. He is putting together Lorna, that's what you're doing here. And we need a network that organizes, makes the story just as sharp, just as cool, just as crisp. Look what's happening to Facebook now. I'm not in that fight, but these algorithms on social media, what they're doing is they're amplifying hate on purpose.
People are being radicalized. And I've talked to them.
It's built into the program. It's not an accident. It's intentional. So we gotta create a counter vector. That's my view.
Absolutely. And Tim, that's one of the things after I spoke with you a few weeks ago and when you told me to go to Unite, and when I saw what you were doing, I said, wait a minute, we are just on the same page.
Yeah.
We got to do this together. So I really, really appreciate you and the work you're doing and helping us. And Scott,
I just
there's
appreciate what you
something
guys
that's
are doing.
still a little puzzling for me. And I want to ask you, for someone that took care of you and so well, I assume, what do you think that happened in that relationship that led you to your path? What did something that you can remember happen, whether it's as a young person or that she did or you did, somebody responded to you in that way that led you to the path?
Oh, it was nothing she did, nothing at all, because she showed nothing but love to me. But I think it was the actions and the things I saw that my dad had done. My dad was very violent, and just to give you a couple of examples, he'd come in and chop up the mattresses with a butcher knife, and then he took a box of kittens that we had and I'm at a young age, a box of kittens we had by a heater, keeping them warm, and splattered them on the wall.
Oh.
And these are very, very traumatic things that happen for a kid to see at my age. And at my age, then you compare it to PTSD of a soldier. That's exactly what it did. I had self anger, self hatred. I didn't like myself, and I just kind of put all of that feelings towards Rebecca aside, and was just looking for something to make myself feel better and feel important. And that's why I led myself down that road.
Well,
And that
thank
really
you.
shows you the sort of the violence and pain and disturbing times as a young person, how that manifests in the world later on and how it can hurt a much larger group of people. So Scott, thank you so much for sharing, this really difficult and disturbing part of your life, but also finding that light and that change. Daryl, I've never met someone who has made more change on a personal level with more people than just about anybody I know. Timothy, God, your work is amazing. I was weeping watching some of the videos because they really spoke to me. I do want to mention that we were going to have Congresswoman Karen Bass on. She was in our virtual green room, but she is at work and had to go back into session. She's in DC in Congress, and she was going to share her time with us with this conversation, and we will have her back at a future date. But she really wanted to take part, but she is doing the work that her constituents expect her to do in Congress, and so that's where she is, and we apologize for her not being here with us today.
Well, thank you. Thank you. This has been such a stimulating and inspiring conversation. I tell people most of the times that I am my mother's daughter. My mother is a community leader, and one of the things she always does, she goes around, she finds out what the needs of the community is, and then she would try to find a solution. So I hope that this conversation is a starting of us trying to find this solution. So on behalf of the Global Institute, I would like to say thanks to all of our guests for sharing your voices with this town hall today.
Thank you for having us. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
Karen Bass was not here, but I want to say congratulations to her. Sorry she couldn't be with us, but she's also being tapped for vice presidential candidate. So we want to wish her well in that. Tim, my friend, thank you for being a friend. Thank you for being there when I call on you. And thank you for sharing this amazing Unite with the World. And I know this is going to be the start of many more for us to do together.
I got new guests. I'm getting ready to ask a few new guests to join.
Absolutely, great. So we will be doing some more of this. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us all.
Daryl, what an amazing experience you've given to us today.
Thank you, Lorna.
It's just truly wonderful. And I thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for the courage and that you were able to step out and to bring this to us and to bring it to the world. So thank you so much. And Scott, thank you for sharing your life with us. We really appreciate this. And we're hoping, like I said, it's a part of the solution to some of the problems that we're experiencing. So again, Sarah, what can I say? Such an honor to co-moderate with you. You are so amazing. And I'm so delighted and so honored to be co-moderating with you today. Thank you.
Thank you.
To those who subscribe and ask questions, and to everyone who listened and stayed with us today, thank you. Please know, as we prepare to celebrate freedom, that the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the amendments, and the Pledge of Allegiance, no matter the original intent of these documents or the songs about our country, every citizen of this country is entitled to the quality and fairness promised within them. Because immigrants of many cultures, including mine, help to build this. We have to find a way to be one nation under God, indivisible, just like these kids every day in school. They put their hand on their heart and they pledge this allegiance, and they realize that they're saying this every day. So let's make it real for these kids as adults. We have to realize liberty and justice must be for all.
Amen.
Thank you so much.
Amen indeed.
And see you next time. Thank you all.
Thank you.
America.